Okay, and from that hypothesis or the guess that they're asking you to prove, you use definitions, postulates, properties, theorems to get to a conclusion. Okay, and that conclusion again is something they may want you to show is true. And we can't just say things are true, we have to have proof. And again, what we use for proofs, we use definitions. For example, if it says an angle is complementary, we can say that angle or two angles are complementary. We can say those angles add to be 90 degrees. The reason for that is because that's the definition of complementary. Okay, postulates, we have a few postulates we've done so far. We have the angle addition postulate, the segment addition postulate, things like that. We have properties of equality, like when we're solving an equation, we can add the same number to both sides. That's the addition property of equality. When we're solving an equation, we can subtract the same number from both sides. That's the subtraction property of equality. Okay. We also had reflexive, transitive, symmetric. All of those properties can be used. We also have theorems, which as we go through geometry class, we're going to add more and more theorems to our tool belt. Here I have an example of kind of how a proof works. So here we have, they probably said A and B are complementary. A is congruent to C. Show that angle C and angle B are complementary. Okay, so here we have our given. Let me highlight it. Okay, we are given that A and B are complementary, and we're given that A is congruent to C. From that, they want us to prove, and this is always the last step of your proof, is whatever you were asked to prove. They want us to prove that C and B are also complementary. So what you would do is you always start with the given information. So we were given that A and B were complementary. That's our given information. Because we know A and B are complementary, we can say that the measure of A plus the measure of B is 90, because we know that's what complementary means. If two angles are complementary, okay, we know they add to equal 90. Our reason for that, over here we have to give a reason, and our reason is that's the definition of complementary angles. They used comp to abbreviate. Okay. Again, our goal is to show that C and B are complementary. The next thing they said, well, A is congruent to C. We know that because we were given that information. They gave that to us. Okay. They used that to say, well, if they're congruent, then their measures are equal. And it seems weird that you would have to do that step, but you do. You have to go from, well, if they're congruent, that means their measures are equal. And our reason for that is that's the definition of congruent angles, is two angles that have equal measures. See, what they do from here is they take step 2 up here, and they replace the A with a C. Now, the reason they could do that is because we showed up above that measure of angles A and the measure of angle C are the same thing. They're equal. We can replace it, and that's called the substitution property. When you take two things that are equal, we use one to replace the other. That's called substitution. Now, over here, they put steps 2 and 4. Just so that we would know, look at step 2, look at step 4. That's what we were using substitution with. So that if someone's looking at this proof and they're going, huh, what did you substitute from? They're telling you which steps to take a look at, 2 and 4. We took step 2 and substituted our value from step 4. So now we're to the point where we know that the measure of angle C plus the measure of angle B equals 90. Well, what do we call two angles that add to be 90 degrees? We call them complementary. Okay, so from going from here to here, the reason we could do that is because that is what complementary means. Definition of complementary angles. This is their abbreviation for complementary. is COMP, and that's their abbreviation for angles, is an angle symbol with an S in it. But you can always write the full thing out. All right, let's take a look at another one. So we are given that angles A and B are supplementary, and that the measure of angle A is 45. With that information, they want us to, sorry, let me get a pencil here. They want us to prove that last thing down there. They want us to prove that the measure of angle B is 135 degrees. Okay, we always start with our given information. So step one of the proof, we have the steps. This time they wrote the steps down. We need to fill in some reasons here. Okay, so here's their first step is angle A and B are supplementary and angle A is 45. What's our reason for that? Why do we know that? They gave that to us. It was in our given information. Okay, so that first reason is going to be given. And most of the time, your first step in a proof will be your given information. Your reasoning is given. Number 2 here, the measure of angle A plus the measure of angle B is 180. How do we know? If we're just looking at this top part, we can only go from stuff we have up above. So what in step 1 told us that angle A plus angle B would equal 180? Is it that A and B are supplementary, or is it that the angle A is 45 degrees? Because that's all we know right now. Well, the fact that A and B are supplementary tells us that when we add them together, they're going to equal 180 degrees. So our reason for that is because that is what supplementary means. Okay, so our reason there would be definition of supplementary. And I have a cleaner page I'll go to next. So we've justified step 2. Step 3, now they say, well, 45 plus the measure of angle B is 180. How did we get from step 2 to step 3? What changed and why did it change? So here we had the measure of angle A plus the measure of angle B is 180, and here we now have 45 instead of the measure of angle A. Okay, we replaced angle A with 45. Why could we do that? Because up here in our given information, we were told that angle A was 45. So we could replace it. Anytime you replace it with something it's equal to, that's called substitution. Okay, so we've justified step 3. Let's move on to step 4. Finally, they find the measure of angle B is 135. How did we get that? Well, the way that happened is we wanted to find the measure of angle B. It had 45 added to it, so just like we do when solving an equation, which is basically what we do here, we would subtract 45 from both sides. And when we do, we get the measure of angle B equals 135. So what's our reason there? What did we do? Well, we subtracted the same number from both sides, and the property that tells us we can do that is the subtraction property of equality. I'm going to go to the next page because it has it all written out. Okay, so our first step, our reason was given. Our second step, the reason is that was the definition of supplementary angles. Our third step, reason was substitution. When we know two things are equal, we can replace one with the other. We replaced measure of angle A with 45. And our last step, our reason was subtraction property of equality, because we went from step 3 to step 4 by subtracting 45 from both sides of the equation. All right, you doing all right there? Do you have any